Hello and welcome to SEDA College Live. So glad you're here again today. So glad that you're ready to listen and interact with me. Please put your comments in the comment box so that I know what you're thinking about. If you've got any questions, I'd love to hear from you. So today I'm talking about measuring your knowledge of English vocabulary. I think this is a real problem. Like yesterday we were talking about why English vocabulary is so difficult to learn and talking about the fact that it comes from so many different areas that English vocabulary is really eclectic and has global reach in terms of where the language came from in the beginning. And so the structures and the concepts behind the language are a real mixture from other languages and many different people. So now what I want to talk about today is like, how do you know what it is that you know, and how do you know what it is that you still need to learn? And so that's my question that I'm addressing today. It's like, how much vocabulary do you need to know, and how much vocabulary do you know already? That's what I'm kind of looking at today. That those are my questions, and I feel that if you knew what it was that you needed to know, and if you knew what it was that you knew already, it would be a whole lot easier for you and kind of happier experience. And so we also got a few confusing words here for you to test your knowledge, just to see like what's your depth of knowledge. So when we talk about like how much vocabulary do you need to know, the problem is that vocabulary, you know it at different depths. You know, when we talk about productive and receptive vocabulary. So productive vocabulary is words that you're able to say, that you know them well enough to actually use them yourself. And receptive is when you know them well enough to be able to understand what they mean when you hear them or you see them written down. So in terms of learning, you usually learn it from the receptive moving towards the productive. So like studies show that you need to see it either written down or said numerous times before you're actually ready to adopt it. So that's why reading is really good for you, or just listening is good for you, because all that time you're actually that language is sort of soaking into your being, and you're getting ready to then use it productively. That would be the way a child learns as well, that they sit and they listen and they look around, and then they start to speak. You know, first comes the receptive, then comes the productive. And so it's really difficult for you to say how much vocabulary do you know already, because how much do you know, and at what stage, and is it just latently there ready to be produced, or is it do you have no idea about it? Have you never seen it before, or are you able to use it, or somewhere in the middle? So I thought we'd start off today with the CEFR, the Common European Framework of Reference for Language, and just look at these descriptors which describe the vocabulary range and vocabulary control at different levels. So as you know, A1 means beginner, A2 pre-intermediate, B1 intermediate, B2 upper intermediate, C1 advanced, and C2 is doesn't mean native speaker. It means like very effective speaker of English. And so if you start on the A1 on the vocabulary range, basically you just have isolated words and phrases. So that means that you can say, good morning, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. And that's about it. And you can maybe say, how much is that? And maybe you can say to the taxi, you know, take me home, and give your address. But that's only A1. Then A2 is when you start to have enough vocabulary to be able to communicate your basic needs and to manage your own survival. So you can shop, and you can count, and you can ask questions about what you need. You can, engage in some kind of a small way. And a strong A2 then has enough vocabulary to be able to talk about routine, manage daily transactions in familiar situations and topics. Then when you get to B1, which is intermediate, you have enough vocabulary to express yourself with some circumlocution. So circumlocution is when you go around something. So you don't know how to say what it is that you want to say. So you have to go on a little journey and express yourself in a different way according to what you know you can say. And so you're using circumlocution, but you're able to talk on most topics that are relevant to your everyday life. So you can talk about your family, your hobbies, your interests, your work and your travel, and current events. When you get to B2, you still use circumlocution, but you don't repeat the language so much, so you have a wider range of vocabulary. You still have lexical gaps, as in you still have things that you don't know how to say and you still hesitate, but you're able to talk about a wider range of things. So you're going out from yourself. So instead of it just being complete survival English, now you're able to talk about your environment and your ideas. And then by the time you get to C1, you have a good command of a broad lexical repertoire, and you have gaps, but there's little obvious searching for expression and good command of idiomatic expression. So at this point, you're out here and you can say a whole lot of things on different parts of life that are not just connected with you personally. And then the goal is to be a C2 speaker. And that doesn't mean that you know all the vocabulary in the world, because depending on what's going on in your world, you know different things. So, medical English has got a whole range of its own vocabulary. Legal English has got a whole range of its own vocabulary. Technical IT English has got another whole range of vocabulary. So it depends on your sphere as to what vocabulary you know. And, we are all involved in lifelong learning. It's not like you should expect that you're ever going to learn it all, because that's not going to happen. In terms of control, there we have vocabulary control as well. So in A2, you can control a narrow repertoire dealing with concrete everyday needs. In intermediate, you can handle unfamiliar topics and situations. So just take a look at that for a minute, and then I'll get back to you. I'm back. So let's move on. The question is, how much vocabulary do you need to know? So the CAFR, okay, it's interesting because you can plot your own development on the CAFR. But if you say, how many words do I need to know? That's the question. So I've got an article here that we're going to look at together from BBC News. The article is called "How Many Words Do You Need to Speak a Language?" And so what do you think? How many words do you think you need to know? So this is the article now. And according to the article, as we read, it says this person had been learning German for 3 years, trying hard to practice every day, and still they felt that they couldn't retain more than 500 words. So the premise of the article is that we're okay, look, just tell me how many words do I need to know, and then I'll know when I've got the end of my journey. And so this is the question that the article is trying to pose. How many words do you need to know in order to be an effective speaker? So then the question is, how many words are there in the English language? And the problem is that there's 171,000 words in the English language. And that's not including the 50,000 words that are obsolete. So there's an enormous number of words in the English language, according to the Oxford English Dictionary. But the point is that some of them are more common and some of them are less common. And so it's a question of which are the right words that you need to know. So this applied linguist called Stuart Webb, he was asked to give his opinion, and what he says is that typically a native speaker knows 15 to 20,000 word families. So if you consider now, they say that there's 170 words, now 170,000 words, now we're talking about 20,000 word families. So the first thing to do is to tidy it up into word families, because like if you know go, then you know went, and you know gone, and you know, so you have all these different words that come from the same. If you know happy, you know happiness, and you know happier, and you know happiest. So are you going to count each of those different words as a different word? Then it's so hard. So the applied linguists, they cut these down into word families or lemmas. And so there's just one. So happy is one word family, and that includes happiness, happier, happiest, happily, and every other word that comes from from the root of happy. And that way then the native speaker says that if you know 20,000 of those word families, then you are sort of an average native speaker. So it's the root word and all its inflections. So run, running, ran, blue, bluer, bluest, bluish, etc. It's just one concept word, and all the words that come off it is one word family. So then the point is that, okay, we're talking about somebody who's learning German and they only know 500 words, and they're like, oh my goodness, I have to get to 220,000. Like, that's going to be a job for way too long. So is it realistic to want 20,000 words? Well, it's unlikely that you're going to get there, because you know a native speaker in any language has been learning their language since they were a child, and they grow their language each year as they have world experience and they live their lives. They learn new words, and as a learner of a second language, you actually have to catch up on that vocabulary. So Professor Webb said that in his experience, he found that French people in Britain, or English people learning French in Britain, or people learning English in Japan, they find it hard to get over the 2,000 or 3,000 words, even after years and years of study. So this is if you're in a classroom setting and you're just learning from the book the same words, they're just repeated again and again, and it's really, really hard for you to get beyond those 2 to 3,000 most frequently used words. And in fact, he quotes a study from Taiwan which showed that after 9 years of learning, half of the students hadn't even learned 1,000 words. And we certainly find this in Ireland with Irish people who are learning Irish language, is that so many of them sit in a classroom for years and years and years, and yet at the end of it, didn't learn 1,000 Irish words. And so this is a problem, and the question is, like, you know, why is the language learning so ineffective? And also, how are they ever going to become like a speaker if they can't learn 1,000 and they have to learn 20? So this is what he says anyway. Like, you don't need to learn all the words in a language. And for example, Zaiziva is a tropical weevil. Like, if you don't live in the tropics, you don't actually need to learn about the name of a tropical weevil. So it's, you know, it's like it depends on your context as to what words you need. So Professor Webb says that if you want to be effective, you need to pick up 800 to 1,000 lemma, or like word groups, and learn those. So you need to know which are the essential 1,000 words that you need to learn. And then once you've learned those 800 word families, you'll understand 75% of the language that's spoken in normal life. Well, 75% means that, you know, like if you go into a corpus, if you record and then you look down at what they said, you know, oh, I know 75% of those words. But the problem is that if you don't know what the content words are, then even if you know the other words that go around it, you may not actually know the direction that the language is going in. So like these 800 word families are important because they're used a lot. So, and words like house, perhaps, those are words where abode is like not a common word. You don't really need to use that because people don't say abode very often when they usually mean house. So the question is there a light at the end of the tunnel for the person that's trying to learn German and can't even learn 500 words? Well, 800 words will help this person speak language in a day-to-day setting. But if you want to understand the TV or follow a film, 3,000 words is what you need, he says, according to Stuart Webb. That means that, well, you've got your 75%, and then the 25% that you need to learn, you're moving towards, so that's mad, isn't it? Because 800 is 75%, and then 2,250 is starting to reduce the 25%. But now this is more research that he did. He said that if you want to actually read novels and newspapers and talk about, the world around you, so maybe you're talking about like a film on TV, sort of Friends, something that's very common, predictable about day-to-day language that you use every day, you can understand that on 3,000 words. But if you want to read novels about life that's different to yours, or newspapers, documentaries, then you need 8,000 to 9,000 words. So think about that. 800 is 75% of the words, and then the other 8,250 is just trying to close this gap on understanding what's going on, because that's the variety in the languages, the different words that you need to know. So you always imagine yourself that you're moving away from yourself. The 800 words sort of encapsulate you and keep you going, and then as you move out and you learn more about yourself, or you express more about yourself, talk more about yourself, your environment, and your environment gets bigger and bigger, you need more and more and more word families. So there's another person who's really very influential as a applied linguist called Paul Nation, and he's doing research on word families, and this is what he says, is that you need to, if you want to listen and understand things, you need 6,000 to 7,000 word families. And if you want to read and understand what you're reading, then you need to have 8,000 to 9,000. So this is not productive language. This is for reading and listening. So this is your receptive skills. So if you have a receptive knowledge of 9,000 word families, you are going to be successful in reading most things. Like a native speaker, an educated native speaker would be on 20,000 word families. But like I guess it's whatever you're interested in, you learn those words first. And you're like, unless you're bilingual, if English is a second language for you, then you have, a certain amount of years to catch up on before you can expect to know the vocabulary of a native speaker, because they've been engaging with that vocabulary for longer than you. So yeah, Paul Nation's vocabulary size test. The question is, and this is what this presentation today is about, is like, well, how can you know how much vocabulary you already know? So Paul Nation is doing some amazing work, because he set up this test, and it's free. And you can see there that it's the School of Linguistics and Applied Language Studies and the School of Engineering at Victoria University. And this is like an absolutely bona fide website. And the idea is that you, for free, can go onto this website. You just go to vocabularysize.com and you can do a test. So it's somewhere around 100, 140 questions, and you just read, you do your reading test, and you see what you know, and it randomly checks your vocabulary, and then will give you a vocabulary size. I advise, like, it's not a time test. It doesn't matter how long you take to do it. You don't get more points for doing it fast. So the idea is that you actually take your time, and you read it slowly and carefully, and you do your best to get the right answer each time. And if you don't know, you say you don't know, and it's not graded. It doesn't get more difficult. It's all mixed up together, and in that way you can get some kind of a real sense of your vocabulary knowledge. Then you can take a break and you can do it again, and you can test if your vocabulary is getting bigger. So I really recommend you do this test. If you look at the frequently asked questions that are on the website, it says, like, one of them is like, what's the catch? And so Paul says to us, there's no catch in this website. It's free, but the idea is that the website helps teachers to better understand their students' needs. It helps researchers because they can trial their tests and validate vocabulary-related tests, and they can get feedback from learners in terms of what they know and they don't know. And it helps you as a learner because you can get an objective measure of your vocabulary size. And then you can use this to set learning goals and follow your own progress. So this is a really interesting website that can be of great benefit to you. And then, yes, here we are. He is also offering you some practice. So you go on, you do your test, it gives you your level, and then after that you can do some practice. So then after that it will give you this slide here shows that your level is a 1, and the highest level you can get to is a 20. So you can watch your level moving up. And then, whereas the test is a mixture of difficult questions and easy questions, the practice, they can put you to the level that you reached on your test, and then from there you can work on graded language to get up to a higher place. So this is like a really interesting thing for you to do, just so that you can measure, are you making any progress, so that you're not just in a fudge, just like, how am I doing here? Am I ever going to learn anything? How much do I know? And where do I need to go? You can say, okay, I'm going for 20,000 words. Oh no, as a native speaker, I'm going for a non-native speaker, I'm going for 9,000 words. And this is my point now. This is where I'm at now. So I think that's pretty exciting, really, for you to know how you can improve how you can measure what you know, and then to have some kind of an idea of, once you know what you know, then you can know where to go from there, So just to recap, there's 170,000 words used in the English language, not including obsolete words. But then the question is, like, how well organized are these into word families? So applied linguists have defined that a native speaker knows 15 to 20,000 word families. So that's groups of words where the core word is the same. So like happy, happiness, happier, happiest. That's all one word in terms of this measurement. Then research shows that people who study languages in a traditional setting often struggle to learn more than 20 or 30 words, even 2,000 or 3,000 words, even after years of study. And that's just because they're not getting to hear the massive amount of language that you need to learn, because, as I say, you have to hear it and read it before you can then produce it. So like with the opening up of the internet and the ability to watch language online, watch film, watch videos, YouTube channels and so forth in English on what you're interested in. You can develop the vocabulary that interests you. And so you can actually learn much faster than this, because this is like traditional setting, book bound, course book bound language, where it's just not successful. And then in terms of numbers, 800 word families will give you 75% of the language that's spoken in day-to-day life. So 75% of the language is only 800 words. So that looks pretty easy. But learning that extra 25% is the problem. And so if you want to just be able to understand, around you and a bit bigger as to what you might see in films that you would recognize, TV that you would already understand, with ideas that you understand, 3,000 words is enough for you. And I suppose this is as far as you reach in a traditional classroom. So then if you want to get to the place where you understand novels and newspapers and a wider range of language, you need 8,000 to 9,000 word families. And you do that by going out into the real world, listening to people, reading books, reading magazines, watching TV. Basically, you need to be exposed to the language that you want to learn before you can learn it. So unless you work and watch videos and read books about the world of IT, you're not going to know that vocabulary. So you can't sort of sit there and say, oh, I wish I knew everything about medical English. You have to go and engage with that world before you can learn that language. So equally, you have to open yourself up to reading and new ideas in order to learn first receptively and then productively the language that comes with those ideas. I would highly recommend that you measure your current progress using vocabularysize.com. So if you use this site, it's kind of unique, but I think there are other sites out there. It doesn't have to be this one, but it's just that Paul Nation is very reputable, and the work that he's doing is well recognized, that you can measure what your current, where you are now, and then if you keep measuring yourself and the test changes, then you can see if you're making progress. And often when you're somewhere around upper intermediate to advanced, you get a little bit frustrated because you can't measure the progress. You don't know how far out you've reached, and you don't know where the boundary is, and you just start to feel a little bit like, what am I learning here? How much progress am I making? Whereas you go in to do a test like that, vocabularysize.com, you say, oh, well, this is what I've got. And then take a break, then go back and have another look. I guess it's a bit like weighing yourself. You shouldn't do it every day, but if you do it every now and again, then that gives you an idea of where you are. So let's just, it's your turn now. Let's just do some practice here and test your knowledge of confusing words. So we've got these two words here, and I'm not going to read them, because if I read them, then you'll probably know which one it is. So Mrs. Hodge was sent to Which for shoplifting, as it was her third offence. It was very rich of Trevor to refuse to cooperate with us. Is that childish or childlike? By improving the interview process, we're hoping to achieve more treatment of immigrants to this country. More respectful is the meaning that we're looking for. Did you notice that your remarks had on Gregory? He was quite shocked. My reason for moving to Wicklow was to be nearer my family. So the main reason, which is the correct word there. The examiner decided that he couldn't mark the paper as the candidate's handwriting was, and this means that he wasn't able to read it. When the police frogmen came to the surface, they reported that they had discovered the what. So this means like the dead body, which is the word for dead body there. And what would you do in my situation? Like what would you tell me to do, which is the correct word there. That new hairstyle seems to, it looks good on you, which is the word. Katie had always written up her which every night since she was a schoolgirl. And the story behind the story is look before you leap. So what's that? And many businesses have suffered as a result of a worldwide, and this means like money recession. So, do you know those words? Are you ready to check them? Okay, let's have a look. So these words, you can see that they're oftentimes they're like what we were talking about yesterday, that the spelling and the pronunciation are like gone, that the spelling, there's no matching between them. And so this is the problem, why vocabulary is so difficult to understand, isn't it? So difficult to absorb, and difficult to absorbing it in a written form and absorbing it in a spoken form is like two different challenges. So Miss Hodge was sent to jail. So jail is spelled G-A-O-L for shoplifting. It was very childish of Trevor to refuse to cooperate. So childish means that you're immature, and childlike is then different. Childlike is childish. Yeah, it's quite difficult to explain the meaning of the two words, isn't it? But the childish is the right one that goes in there. By improving the interview process, we're hoping to achieve more humane treatment of immigrants. So a human is the noun and humane is the adjective. Did you notice the effect your remark had on Gregory? Yes, effect with E. You say affect. Do you notice the effect, the effect, the effect, affect, effect? It's pretty close. The pronunciation is pretty close, isn't it? But it's effective. The effect is with an E. My principal reason, this is principal spelled L-E, and principal spelled A-L, is the person head of your school. So your principal is the head teacher. And the principal reason is the main reason. Principal. The pronunciation is almost identical. So the examiner decided he couldn't mark the paper as the handwriting was illegible. The pronunciation of the other one is eligible. So the meaning is completely different, but the eligible and illegible is, of those two words. When the police frogmen came to the surface, they reported that they had discovered the corpse. So corpse is spelled like that. Would you advise me? What would you advise me to do in this situation? Advise with an S is a verb, advice with a C is a noun. The new hairstyle seems to suit you. It looks just right on you. So suit is S-U-I-T, and sweet is with a suite of furniture is like a French word, and that's why it looks like that. It looks different. Katie had always written up her diary every night, and the moral of the story is look before you leap, which is different from morale. Morale is when you feel good or you feel bad, and moral is like the meaning behind something. So many businesses have suffered as the result of a worldwide economic recession. That's the one there. So we've got another test here. And so I'm giving you two words and you just have to choose which is the right one. So you've got peer and peer, medal and medal, wave and wave, core and core, pair and pair, gamble and gamble, course and course, horse and horse, oar and oar, fair and fair, tears and tears, beer and beer, guilt and guilt, sweets and sweet, sweets and sweet, canvas and canvas, and aisle. So that's really pretty frustrating, isn't it? Because those words are absolutely not connected to each other in meaning, and yet they're all identical in pronunciation. So the challenge here is to choose the right word and choose the right spelling of it. So to peel your fruit, what's that word? Untreated metal, like the metal that comes out of the ground. What's that called? A gold that you put onto an ornament. So it's not solid, it's just gold on the outside. What's that? Then if you put money on something and you hope to win more money, what's that? An award for service, if to greet by lifting your hand. So like, what's that called? A series of lessons or medical treatments if you have to go and take antibiotics. What's the noun that goes with that? Group of soldiers, who are they? If you're not happy and the water's coming out of your eyes, what's that water called? Or if you're laughing a lot and water's coming out of your eyes. What does an artist paint on? Another word for interfere. A person who is your equal. Two of something. If you are aware that you've done something wrong. An alcoholic drink. That's an easy one, isn't it? And a passage between rows of seats. Now, what's that going to be? Are you ready? So, shall we check them? Here we go. So, to peel a fruit is pear, P-A-R-E. That's just another word. Pear potatoes, pear carrots. Iron ore is a metal. Ore is a metal. It's what comes out of the ground. Gilt is gold paint. Gamble, spelled like that, is when you put money down. A medal is an award. That's a wave, of course. You do a course of antibiotics or a course of lessons. You do a course on learning English, or you do a course of antibiotics. So a group of soldiers is called a corps as well. So that's funny because that P is completely silent. So that's a corps. And then water from your eyes, tears. A canvas is what an artist paints on. Medal, A-D-D-L-E, it means interfere. Then your peer is someone who is equal to you. You do peer evaluation if you tell each other how you're doing. Peer correction if you correct from your partner. Two of something is a pair. So the pair, like, a pair of shoes, and pair your vegetables. The spelling is different, the meaning is different, but unfortunately the sound is identical. Awareness of done something wrong is guilt. And the gold paint that you put on the outside is also guilt. But again, the word is completely different. The origin is different. And the meaning is different, but the pronunciation is just the same. An alcoholic drink made with hops is beer. A passage between rows of seats is an aisle. So here's some more. So they're the same words. Peer and peer, medal and medal, wave and wave, core and core, pair and pair, gamble and gamble, course and course, horse and horse, oar and oar, fair and fair, tears and tears, beer and beer, guilt and guilt, sweets and sweet, sweet and sweet, canvas and canvas, and aisle and aisle. Exactly the same pronunciation. So the centre of an apple, what's that? If someone is rough and common as an adjective, an island, that one's pretty easy, and just or right, correct. So when you've got your living room set of furniture, what's that called? And then a jetty, another word for a jetty. An animal that you ride. If you want to get votes Then the verb to go around and say, vote for me, what's that called? A verb that means jump around playfully. Then what do you use? Like if you want to row, what are those things called? Money that you pay when you go on the bus. 2 rows, so in a stadium, what have you got going one above the other? It's to sit on, so you sit here and then they sit above you and they sit above you. What kind of seating is that called? If you don't insist on something, if you don't enforce it, this is just a kind of a stretcher used to carry a dead body. If you have a sore throat and a sugary taste. So it's not that the words are difficult, it's the point that the words are, or some of the words are difficult. Some of these are high frequency and some of them are much lower frequency. So that's the problem, is that how are you going to know if you know the high frequency from the low frequency and if you know the correct spelling for those words. So the center of an apple is a core, the apple core. You have the core of the earth. You have core meaning, and when you do exercise, you do your core exercise, which is your core is like the center of you. You've got to have strength in your core. Coarse means rough or common. An island is an isle, and if something is just or right, as in justice and justice, then it's fair. You have your living room suite. You also have your ensuite bathroom. And then a jetty is a pier. An animal that you ride is a horse. To canvass is when you go around asking someone to vote for you, or you can canvass for someone else, but you just promote them in an election. To jump around playfully is to gamble. What you row with are oars. Your bus fare. And then you get tiered seating. So the tears that come out of your eyes is different spelling to the tiers that you sit on. So if you have seating like that, that's called tiered. And you can waive a fee. So if you're supposed to pay a fee, but they say, oh, you don't have to pay on it, then that's called waived. You can also waive your right to anonymity if you're in a court case or something like that. A bier is used for carrying dead bodies. That's a very low frequency word. If you're hoarse, which I am a little today, you have a sore throat and a sugary taste. That's obviously sweet. So there you can see confusing words. Confusing because they sound identical, but you can only know by context if you're talking about being a little horse or riding on a horse. An iron ore or a row. And like pay your bus fare, is it fair that you pay your bus fare? Well, I think it is fair that everyone pays their fare. So you can only know by the context that the word comes in as to which word it is if it's in a spoken situation. So we're just talking today about how much vocabulary you need to know. And we've ascertained that as a second learner of English, you want to get to about 8,000 or 9,000 word families. And the best way, in my opinion, to get there is first to measure yourself and to know where you are already. And then you know how far you are along your journey. And that I do definitely think will encourage you. So if you can measure yourself, it's like weighing yourself. If you know where you are, then you can know much better. You can have your targets and you can get there. So I definitely, we tested your knowledge of confusing words here today, but I definitely would recommend that you use Paul Nathan's site and test your vocabulary, get a number, and then do some reading, do some listening, do some speaking, and then go back in a little while and test yourself again and see if you're making any progress. So thank you very much for listening to me today, and I look forward to speaking to you again tomorrow. Please put your comments into the comments box because it's really encouraging to me to get some feedback from you. Thanks a lot. Bye.